I'm going to go ahead and get started. I think we're still expecting one or two others, but I have 12 o'clock on the dot, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Was someone just able to join? I thought I heard a beep. What we'll do is we'll go ahead and do staff introductions first. This is Phil Breitenbuscher. I am the project director for the statewide system reform program. And here in the Children and Family Futures offices is
Russ Bermejo. I'm program associate here and the change leader for Iowa.
And this is Kristen Chung. I'm the administrative assistant.
And then we also have on the phone Teresa.
Hello, this is Teresa Lemus, and I am the change leader for New York and for the state of Alabama.
Great. And Alexa.
Hi, this is Alexis Balke, and I'm the change leader for Colorado and Ohio.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. So now I would like to do real briefly, if we can, introductions from each of you. I know you kind of announced yourself as you came on, but we'll go in the order that I have you in and start with New York.
Hi, this is Rob Rosenhaus. I'm the project manager in New York.
Thanks, Rob. And Ohio, there's two of you.
Hi, I'm Veronica Burrows. I'm the CIP program analyst here in Ohio.
Hi, this is Stephanie Nelson. I'm the CIP director in Ohio.
Great. And Alabama.
Hi, this is Kim Cole, project manager here in Alabama.
Great. And Iowa.
This is Kathy Thompson from our state CIP program. I'm the project manager.
Great. And is there someone from Colorado on?
Yes, this is Sarah. I'm the program liaison for Colorado.
Great. Did I miss anyone? Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you all for joining our call this month. We launched these monthly calls last month, and last month we went through the conference cost approval process. If you want, I think we have that recorded. If you're interested in going back and listening to that call, you can do so. We're recording today's call as well. If there's something that you think would be helpful for a colleague of yours to listen to, we can send you the link for today's call if you want to go back and listen to part of this or all of it later on. I think at this point you have all of this, so we don't need to go through any of the kind of logistical things, but this really is intended to be a conference call, and we plan to have a monthly call with you each month, aside from next month, because next month most of us will be at the national conference, and so we're going to put a hold on the call, and many of you will be at the national conference at the Gaylord in Maryland, and we will have an in-person meeting during the national conference. So if you or your colleagues are attending the National Drug Court Conference, we do invite you to come to our gathering, and there's been an official invitation that's gone out a couple of times now for that gathering. And there'll be more information coming out in the next couple of weeks about that meeting to help your staff, you or your staff that are attending, be prepared for the discussion at the gathering. So, so again, thanks for joining today. We wanted to focus today on the semi-annual progress report, and we did have a call with some of you some months back regarding the first semi-annual progress report that was really about the structure and how to utilize the template that's given to us by OJJDP and how to make that fit, because it's really geared towards local projects who are serving clients, and this is really about a this project is about a planning grant. So we had some discussion about really logistical type of things, and we can go over some of that. So I will take some time to go through the grants management system, but I want to talk to you more about what OJJDP is looking for in your updates in terms of our lessons that we're learning across the site. So, so I'm going to frame this in a little bit of an update on how we're seeing all of you across the 5 states progressing on your programs, on your projects, and then help you to provide you, I should say, with a framework that you might consider using in your narrative so that we can consistently capture some of the lessons, some of the decision points that you've made in your state across the states, so that if there's a round 2 of SSRP, we can disseminate this information. That's really important to the administrator, Bob Listenby, and to the associate administrator, Kelly Dressler, is that we are capturing lessons along the way, and how do you do this type of statewide system reform work, and what does it really take? Why did you make certain decisions? Not that they're good, bad, or indifferent. It's just understanding the reasoning and the rationale behind that helps other states think through some of this decision making as they might want to take on this work, or even maybe not a state, maybe a large jurisdiction. So that's really what I want to kind of spend a little bit of time discussing with you today, and they will provide you some basic tips on upload and that kind of thing. And again, this is really aimed to be a discussion. So we've done the introductions already, but it sounded like a few folks have joined. So if you joined after introductions, do you want to introduce yourself real quickly?
Yes, Orman Hall from Ohio, the Supreme Court of Ohio and Specialized Dockets.
Yeah, hi Orman, thanks for joining.
Happy to be here.
Hi, this is Sarah, from the program coordinator from the Specialized Docket section.
Great, thanks. Also in Ohio?
Yes, also in Ohio.
Okay, great. Okay. All right, so, oops, I went backwards. Let me see if I can fix that. There we go. Okay, so just as a reminder, there's the 5 states. I think that at this point, all of you know your colleagues. And so, as also a reminder, when we started this project, and many of you, or some of you I should say actually, were at the Georgetown kickoff back in February, and we thought about this opportunity for system-wide change kind of in 3 major areas. And I think that in some ways we're still thinking about 3 ways to take on this work. One is to expand the scale and or capacity of your existing family drug courts. Many family drug courts across the nation don't even operate at capacity. So thinking about how do you expand scale of existing courts, how do you expand the number of family drug courts in your state, and then bring them to scale or bring them to capacity. And then the third is how do we infuse the family drug courts, or consider infusing some of these ingredients that we see to be very helpful into the larger dependency court process, or into the child welfare system. And so in a nutshell, we've kind of really broken this down into 2 strategies. One is expansion and one is infusion. And so I'll use that language as we kind of move through some of these updates. And when we think about system change, this is just a reminder for many of you that were in Georgetown, we think of system change as being a permanent shift in the way you're doing business that relies on relationships across your systems. When we talk about systems, we're talking about child welfare, the treatment agencies, and the court systems within a community to secure the needed resources to achieve better results for all children and families. So building these networks or these relationships across the systems, understanding what resources you're going to need to be able to do this work, and realigning those resources to improve results. So which kind of brings us to where we're at, kind of, or what we're hoping to get accomplished, or what we're hoping that you will be able to accomplish in this 2-year window. And again, some of this is a reminder, but I think as we think about your semi-annual progress reports, thinking about where you're at in this timeline and where you're at and where you're moving towards may be helpful in putting together your narrative or telling your story within your progress report. So the first 2 years, really the goal of this at the end of 2 years is that you have you've developed an implementation plan. How you would go about doing this large-scale statewide system reform, and be somewhere in next year, maybe it's going to be spring or summer, you'll have completed a capacity assessment and be ready to write a proposal to OJDP that would allow you to compete for implementation of a multi-year project to fully implement that program. So, so that's kind of where we're at is in this planning stage right now, and I'm going to talk about where we see all five states. What we're hoping that you'll complete really are these 5 things in these first 2 years, that you're going to conduct a self-assessment of capacity. What currently are you able to do, and where are your gaps? What are your needs? To develop a tier technical assistance plan. What would be the assistance you would need in order to move this out? Who are the peer networks? Again, those relationships we talked about. Begin looking at an implementation period, and what we mean by this is an initial implementation period, or a pilot period, is that you'll conduct in this period, and develop evaluation and information sharing system. So how do you know what you need? How do you know who needs it? How will you know that they got what you thought they needed? So all of those, and we'll talk about how you guys are tackling kind of each of these 5 things. So we're talking about developing an implementation plan. You've all begun working on direction, choosing infusion or expansion. You've begun your planning and how you got organized in order to plan for this. And some of you have begun to look at piloting or begin initial implementation of some of these ideas or concepts. So I'm going to walk through where we see the 5 of you, just so you guys have kind of a context of where everybody's at. But I'm going to come back to this idea of direction, planning, and pilot reform later on in the discussion, because this is where we'd like for you to, where am I at? Yeah, it skipped all the way ahead. All right, you saw everything. There we go. This is where I wanted to stop. So this is where we want you to be thinking about organizing your narrative or telling your story in your semi-annual progress report. And we're going to give you a little bit, kind of like an outline and a place that we think this might fit within your semi-annual progress report in just a moment. But let me give you a quick update on where, in these kind of 3 areas, we see your colleagues and yourselves at in this process. So first of all, I think the first step was really to think about what's our direction. What are we going to try to do with SSRP? Are we going to infuse ingredients, or are we going to expand family drug courts? And 2 of you primarily focused on expansion, whether that's bringing existing courts to capacity or expanding the numbers of courts, or both. One of you focused on infusion, and 1 of you focused on both. And I think actually 2 of you focused on infusion. I apologize, there's a typo there. So there's actually 2 of you doing expansion, 2 of you doing infusion, and 2 of you, or at least 1 of you, doing both as your primary focus. And this has been hard for us to capture, because some of you, as you've moved through this, you've changed directions a bit. You started out thinking we're going to do really just expansion, and then you moved into infusion. And some of you thought just infusion, but you realized that by doing infusion, you're going to expand family drug courts by nature of doing your work. So our thought is, how did you select that? Some of you use stakeholder data, understanding your scale or understanding what the needs are in your community, engaging your partners in discussion. Some of you conducted somewhat of a needs assessment and examined what was needed and what was working. And others of you just had larger discussions with your stakeholders, such as the kickoff meeting. When you came to Georgetown, this was the first time many of you had come together as a team and really begun thinking through which of these directions would be right for your state. And others of you came away from Georgetown still thinking one direction, and then after moving and having discussions with your stakeholders and your executive oversight committees, and sometimes with us helping come out there and have some facilitated discussions with your teams, you've moved into a different direction. So that's kind of where all of you are at, but what I would like for you to think about, and what we'd like for you to write about in your semi-annual progress report, is how did you pick your direction? What was the decision-making process like for you? Who was influential in that decision-making? What were the major decision points? What were the major questions that you had to answer in order to make that decision? So I'll just pause there just in case there's anybody that wants to add anything to this or emphasize any points that I've made here. Okay. The next kind of major milestone, if you will, or point was that you had to figure out, all right, how do we begin planning around this work? So you've thought about the direction you wanted to take, but how do you organize your planning of this work? And so you've developed committees and work groups and action planning groups. And here's some similarities across the states. 4 of the 5 states have a data committee. And that data committee has begun to meet and begun to kind of understand really the capacities that they have access to, not necessarily collecting data per se, but really understanding what are the systems that we have, what's the data that we have that we're collecting well already, and what's missing, and what would we need to change in our data systems in order to really roll this out statewide. 2 of you have already begun to develop some type of sustainability work group, or a work group really focused around resources that would need to be tracked or organized around this type of work to take it to scale. And then some other kind of we saw more other work groups were training work groups or work groups focused just on expansion, and some work groups just focused on infusion and what does infusion mean, and then some focus on improving services, whether that's improving treatment services or building the scope of your family drug courts in terms of services for children, or ensuring that parents are having access to evidence-based programming in your states. So those are some of the work groups that were established, in addition to, of course, all of you created some type of core committee or steering committee or task force that's kind of guiding your work. And then all of you have at least met, or most of you have at least met with your executive committee or formed some type of executive committee. 3 of you have actually had a formal presentation to an executive committee, and at least one of the states on their 2nd round of updates to their executive committee. Some of you actually engaged your executive committee in identifying what information they need to know from your core committee in order to support this work, and even if your state's not successful in obtaining the implementation grant, what does the executive committee need to have or need to know in order to support this work going forward? You've had in-person meeting with the chairs of your work groups, many of you, and those meetings have helped move along your project. Some of you have begun to really use your data within your work group meetings so that you're understanding and you're making data-driven decisions. And that also feeds into that first bullet there. So again, how have you organized around this work? I think this would be important for you to capture in your semi-annual progress report, that you've come together in some way. How did you choose who would be on the committees, what committees you needed, how often they would meet, what's been the challenges for you in bringing together those work groups, what's been the challenges to getting people to attend the meetings, and what's worked really well for you in these meetings? How have they helped you move your project along? Those are some key things we'd really like for you to think about and write about in your semi-annual progress report, and what you talk about in terms of planning and getting organized around this work. Again, I'll take a pause and let anyone else jump in on that if they'd like to. Okay, and that's the last one, really. The last one is begin to consider piloting. And actually, I think we might be missing a slide here. There we go. Let's see here. Yep. So there's a slide missing. I apologize. I don't know what happened to it. But there is, some of you have begun to look at piloting, and we have actual numbers somewhere, but I think on the top of my head, let me think through this for a second. One of you have already identified, at least one of you have identified your pilot sites, or two of you have identified your pilot sites. 2 of you are thinking about, are bringing together work groups in the fall with plans to pilot some of these strategies, or even have pilot sites identified by late fall, early winter. And that's kind of where you're at in piloting either these concepts, whether they're ingredients or reforms, or actually full-on piloting, having pilot sites identified. Some of you, when you've, to develop your piloting or how you selected, some of you have had very, at least 2 of you had application processes that required communities or jurisdictions to submit an application. Some of you required them to submit an MOU with their local treatment agency and their local child welfare agency to state that they would work together. Some of you are in the process of bringing together those communities to begin to explore the idea of piloting these things. So that's kind of the idea of piloting. So think about where you're at in your own state in terms of piloting these concepts, or another word might be testing these ideas out. Again, with the goal being that you're going to have a capacity, which brings me to my next slide. The goal being really that you're hopefully have a capacity, some type of completed capacity or feasibility assessment completed by the time you need to write your application in the next spring or summer of next year. In order for you to write out your application for the implementation grant, you're going to need to know what you need, what resources are needed for full implementation. So how do you do that without trying to test out some of these things and seeing what's working well already in your states and where their major gaps are so that you can identify that feasibility and capacity. So again, just to remind you that you're in a planning grant, not a demonstration grant. So we want to encourage you to test things out, to be thoughtful and not worry that there may not be the outcomes right at the onset that you're hoping for. But what we're looking for is what are the gaps? What are the needed resources, or what are the barriers that are needed to roll this out statewide? Because those things will drive the funding that's needed, and that'll help you identify what level of funding you might need from OJJDP and maybe from and how you might identify local resources that could be redirected to support this work. So again, thinking about where you're at in this process might be helpful for you to begin writing out in your semi-annual progress report. And to begin by thinking through kind of these areas or thinking through this process on how you've gone about this work helps begin to draft up your narrative or begins to tell your story. And so that when you go to apply for additional funds, or that when you begin to roll this out statewide, you have this building narrative in your own state of why decisions were made, who was involved in the decision-making process, what initial challenges you faced, and how you've begun to overcome those challenges. Just as a reminder, that you have a semi-annual progress report due every 6 months. So this next period will cover January 1st through June 30th of this year, and will be due no later than July 30th. And you have to upload your reports into GMS, or the Grants Management System. And I'll talk about some of the logistical stuff at the end of this, but I want to stay with content here for a second. So you heard kind of in a really quick overview way that we're kind of seeing how all of you are tackling this work, and that you've selected direction, you began organizing around your process, you've begun to think about how you're going to test ideas or pilot your reform, and then there's contextual factors that have impacted your work. And I skipped over that a bit, but there's many things that have happened within your states, whether it's leadership changes, staff turnover, budget, meetings at the state level that slowed down work. There may have been other types of contextual new legislation. Any of those other larger contextual factors, I think, are helpful for you to capture, not only for your own narrative, but again for those that come after you, because that's the way state government works. Is that there's going to always be these types of local or statewide influencers, I guess, that impacts our work, and how you adjusted to that, how you navigated that is really important for folks to understand and to be thoughtful about. So we're suggesting that you take this outline and drop this in to actually section 1. I think there's 6 sections of your report, and that you use this outline, and if you can even use these subheaders, it would be helpful for us. If you thought about direction and you wrote the narrative about how you decided on your direction, and your next subheader would be planning and how you got organized around your efforts to plan, how you developed your committees, what were the decisions made, how you've begun to pilot or test or where you're at in that process, beginning to test out or pilot your changes, and then what are the contextual factors. So we're suggesting that this be your outline for section 1. There's 6 sections, 6 major questions that are asked in your semi-annual progress report narrative. So, and this one asks you to indicate the status of each goal. And rather than go through all the goals, because there's another section that also allows you to do that, we're suggesting that maybe you organize section 1 around these 4 areas. Question number 2 tells you to discuss the status of each goal. So here's where you would be able to actually go through what you proposed in your goals and objectives in your task in your proposal, and you could address those more specifically there. But item 1, out of the 6 questions asked in the SAPR or the semi-annual progress report, you can use this section to write your narrative or begin to tell your state story. That's what we're suggesting to you. 2 becomes the status of your goals. 3, if there was any corrective action that was and if there was any issues with that. 4, if you had to submit a GAN, grant adjustment notice. Some of you had to move some dollars around. If that's been done and it's approved, you should just state it. If not, you can say NA. If it's pending, it's a good place to raise the issue and make sure that your program manager is aware. 5 would be technical assistance that you've received and that would be helpful in the future. And 6 is around your performance measures set forth in your application. And then this is to indicate the quantitative terms of the results of that. So it's another place again for you to talk about your strategies. And we reviewed this last time. This is the goals, objectives, and performance measures table. And how we talk about that doing in quantitative terms is that you might say that you developed, and hopefully you can see my mouse here in your task. Your first goal was, for instance, to do a capacity assessment. What strategies did you have to do that? How were you going to measure that work? And then you can say how much has been completed to date in this kind of a table format. And that works really well for that section 6. Okay, I'm going to take a pause again here. And I would invite some of my change leaders, if any of them have comments, before I move on and open up the discussion.
Hi, this is Teresa, and I'm hoping to hear a little bit. I'm hoping to hear a little bit from the sites without putting them on the spot here, just to see if they have any questions. But I guess I just want to reiterate that the reporting narrative, the major questions that Phil that you just covered, I mean, to me are really important. To go to the project officer, but also it's also to me sort of a deliverable that you could provide as an update to stakeholders. And I know that at least my sites are in the process or are doing that on a regular basis, and so I kind of see this chunk, these 6 major questions, as being a really good place for an update and serves as some of the narrative that you're going to need to use for your application. So I'm just going to encourage questions and or comments from my sites, if not other sites.
Hi, this is Alexis, and I just think this is a great opportunity too. This is the first time that OJJDP has done anything at the state level as far as family drug court reform. So really what these reports are going to do is help inform them on the future of these projects, of these larger system reform type projects, and the direction in which they would take, as well as the rest of the field. So I think this is a great opportunity to really tell your story and the lessons learned as you move through the direction, the planning, and how you select your pilot sites and so on. So I think this, looking at this as an opportunity to inform the feds as well as the rest of the field about what this looks like at the state level to have this type of system reform for family drug court.
Yeah. Yeah, good. Just to build off to what Alexis just said, not only is this kind of the first time that they've funded family drug courts at the state level and this systems kind of approach, but it's also very unique that you get a planning grant and to be able to spend 2 years in planning. And so describing why this time is important to your state and how you're getting organized and how decision making is happening, I think is very important for them to hear. So that for future announcements and future solicitations, that they see that this opportunity to be thoughtful about how you'd roll something this major out across the state really does take some time to plan, and that you don't want to just jump right in and begin the work without thinking it through. And so it's really being telling that story and how you're using your time, I think is really helpful for them to hear. Let me ask the grantee, or the awardees, reactions to how we've organized this, reactions to where states are at in terms of an update. Is it helpful for you to hear this information? And also reactions or questions around writing your progress report. And if no one volunteers,
I'll jump in really quick. I know that we've all been silent, but this is very helpful information. And it does seem to me that the general analytic approach that you're taking is the right way to go. I can't remember exactly where I where I heard this, but I think that we spend a lot of time planning just a little bit and doing a lot, and as a result, not doing anything very effectively. And being able to step back and to sort of plan and test before widespread implementation is precisely the way that we need to go. And I think, based on the conversations that we've had just over the span of the last several days with Nancy and Alexis, I can see some important things that we need to do over the span of the next several months that are really going to be very helpful from the standpoint of moving this broad agenda forward.
Thanks, Armin. Appreciate that.
Well, and this is Kathy from Iowa. I also think this is helpful and a good framework to use. I think that one area we've not always been good about is documenting how we got to where we ended up. And I think this helps us do that throughout this planning grant period. I think it'll also capture some similarities, consistency across all 5 projects, even though there are some of those things, but we're all very different where we're at in our states, and this, I think, will help pull that together for several audiences.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. Yeah, and a really good point, too, that we often don't always document our history. We kind of get to a place and people go, why do we make that decision? Yeah, good point. Someone else was joining.
Well, this is Teresa, and I want to go off something Kathy just said, and as well as the gentleman before, and that is, you are all at different places, and though this is going to be a competitive, we believe, announcement, you all are in great positions to be able to tell your story. And I personally don't think it's about, who's further ahead as much as it is, what are the challenges? I mean, each of you has such a different contextual sort of environment, and your states are different sizes. I really think that we hear this all the time working across systems that, one system, and I'll pick on the court, it might be the court, doesn't really understand the challenges or the different perspective that another system has, and vice versa. And I think that it's really important that that you describe that. So because that takes time. It takes time to pull people together. It takes time to, quote unquote, kind of convince others that, of where you're at and why you need to go where you're going. So I think, keeping that in mind is really important, and documenting that process, as Kathy said, is really important, and the changes that are occurring, big, little, all the different places that you make movement or even have backward movement, I think are very important contextual things that the feds have asked for, and I think they would really benefit, and I, in turn, so will the field, for them to understand how this process is working.
Yeah. Any other comments from Colorado or New York or Alabama?
So this is Sarah from Colorado. I don't have a general comment except that I think anytime that the states can get together and talk and have the opportunity to talk with each other is part of the goal of, or at least what I understood the goal of this project to be, which is to develop larger relationships with each other and learn from one another. So for me, this is just the first call since I'm returning from maternity leave, but I see a lot of potential for calls like this, so thank you for thinking of them. I was wondering if I could ask more about, can you return to something that you spoke about just a moment ago about question number 6? And you gave, I realize that the slide is on question number 1 now, but if you could go to the slide that relates to question number 6, that would be helpful. How do you see that, I may have just missed this in your discussion, but how do you see the format for 6 being different than the format for the goal and so the format for section 2? Yeah,
you're right. I mean, actually this table, and Alexis, you can jump in here too. I believe actually we use this table more for section 2 versus section 6. But that has always been the ongoing question, how 2 and 6 relate so closely together. And so we tend to do one in narrative, more of a narrative update, whether you use that for 2 or 6, and then the other is more of this table. And Alexis, you want to add anything to that from your experience with this over the last 4 years?
I think you kind of just hit the nail. This is the approach that we use to really just have a quick look at our performance measures and then where we're at. So if you move forward a slide, Phil, if you can move forward. Yeah, so you'll see on that timeline, oops, backwards one. You can see in that timeline we actually have, depending on what your specific performance measures are, we actually have numbers. So, we train 60, or we have 60 expert consultants and so on and so forth. So it's really taking it more quantitative, whereas section 2 is really, okay, so how did we get there? So we have 60 family drug court expert consultants in our directory, but then the narrative piece will explain who are those 60 and what does that look like and how are we expanding our inventory or directory of expert consultants. So it's more of the explanation of this table.
Great, thank you.
And Sarah, as you get there, I'm more than happy to help you with this piece of it, as we've also gone through many iterations and challenges in developing this. I can help you format that the best for your state.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alexis.
Yeah, and I think most of you kind of figured out how to approach the SAPR in your first round in January, and really what we wanted to focus today on, and it's probably a work in progress, but really we thought section 1 would be the place to tell this story that we're hoping for you to begin to capture your state story is in section 1. Because this is really the takeaway. This is the nuts and bolts, and then the activities that you proposed in your goals and objectives. That's helpful too, but I think the bigger, larger lessons are going to be captured kind of in more of this way. We would also ask if you wouldn't mind, each of you to, when you get ready to upload it, if you could send us a copy of your narrative. We can get it from GMS, but it comes out in a horrible format for us, to be honest, and it would be great for us as we begin to combine your lessons. We won't share your individual SAPRs with anybody, but we're trying to pull it together in aggregate so that we can begin to tell a larger story. And so, so if you wouldn't mind, once you're getting ready to upload, your change leaders will be asking you for a copy of your SAPR. We're also happy to provide any support in writing it as well, in terms of asking questions and you know, and any consultation we could provide. We're happy to do that as well. So, any other thoughts about the actual narrative section and about this portion of kind of storytelling and capturing lessons? Before I move on to some more of the kind of nuts and bolts of and a reminder, I guess, of the GMS process. And anything else from anyone? And in fact, what I'd like to do, even before I get into this, some of you have logged into the grants management system and you did the upload last time and you have no problem and you remember exactly how you did that. So if that's you and you're feeling like I don't need to hear this part again, then I'll go ahead and allow you to drop off. But before I do that, I wanted to make two quick announcements. I spoke about it at the top of the call. We'll be meeting at the National Conference. So if you or your team are traveling to the National Conference, National Drug Court Conference, at the end of July in D.C., we'll be meeting on Wednesday, July 29th, from 12 to 2 p.m. in Chesapeake, J through K. So this will go out to you, but I just wanted you to hear this, that on July 29th we'll have a meeting from 12 to 2, and I apologize over the lunch hour. You're welcome to bring your lunches. We're not allowed to provide any food for you at this meeting, so I apologize for that, but feel free to bring food, and we will we're going to offer you an opportunity to provide a quick update on your state. What are the major successes you've had? What are maybe some challenges that you've experienced thus far? And we'll allow you to interact with your peers and colleagues. You'll probably also hear from the OJDP at the meeting and meet with your change leader teams as well. So looking forward to seeing you all at that meeting. So with that, I'm going to now kind of move in quickly to the functionality of how you upload your report. And there's two ways to do that. One is actually logging into GMS, the Grants Management Data System. And then you'll upload your narrative and you're going to complete your certifications and do all of that in there. You'll also be asked to link over to DCTAT, which is this data tool. And so you may have, some of you may have already done this, and I think they were creating a new data tool for you. Last time I think it was already resolved. So this will ask you to capture kind of the number of meetings and things like that you've attended. And there may be, or trainings that you've had. You may have a lot of zeros in this. That's okay. You need to have this. You need to go into DCTAT and you need to complete the page. You also need to print it to PDF and you need to attach the PDF results or the upload verification from the data collection technical assistance tool. You need to have that saved as a PDF, and then that needs to be one of your attachments in the grants management data system. So, and here's kind of what it looks like when you're logged in. This is what it looks like. I'm not going to go through a lot of this today. Just know that we're here if you need help. Also, their help desk is really helpful also, which the phone number is there in the slides. We'll make sure you get a copy of this. And then grants management system, you'll log in. If you've not logged in since your last upload, your password has expired. So you're definitely going to want to log in early. I would suggest no later than the middle of July. Get your password, go in here, begin creating your semi-annual progress report. Make sure you're able to find your award number, do all those kinds of things so that you're not scrambling kind of the last minute. And do those kind of things. And that kind of brings me to my last kind of note here, which is helpful hints. Get in there early, get your password reset. I guarantee you it's expired unless you're logging in constantly. Make sure you take care of your DCTAT numbers. At least go in and look at the performance measures that are required of you so you know what you need to collect and be ready for that. Start early. And don't upload on Fridays. If you upload on Friday, then it may not post until Monday, which may show you as late, which may freeze your funds. So the minute that your semi-annual progress report is not recorded as received, and it sometimes takes 24 hours for the system to show it as received, and for some reason, as far as we can tell, and our experience in doing this for 5 years, that for some reason it won't show received over the weekend. The computer data system takes the weekends off, I guess. I don't know. So don't plan to upload on Fridays. Begin your uploads on a Wednesday or so and give it time. And that also will give you time in case you run into any snags and you need to get the help desk on the phone. You're going to get them much easier during the week and during business hours. So that pretty much takes us through the call today. Any other questions before we sign off?
Hi, this is Kim.
Hey, Kim.
I didn't have the opportunity to see the first report that was submitted, and I'm going to need some assistance in getting getting the whole entire report so that I can at least see what the first report had in it.
Okay. Yeah, so Teresa, you and I, one way you can do that, Kim, is to reach out to Angela Parker and ask if she would, oh, you know what, Kim, it's in you can log into GMS and you can download it. So, so you'll need to go into the grants management system here. You'll log in. You'll need your, user ID and password. Again, if you don't have that, you'll have to go to the help desk and ask them to send it to you. And whoever's on file as your contact will get a new username and password resent to you, or remind you of your username and reset your password. And it'll be all kinds of crazy numbers and characters. And then what happens is once you log in to the system, what it's going to do is pull up, you're going to find your award, and you'll probably only have one award with the GDP. If you're a state that has multiple awards, you have to find this one, but you'll probably only have one. You'll click on it, and then you can go over on the right-hand side of your screen. You can go to reporting, and you'll see that there's you'll be able to go to your January report, and then you can download the narrative and all your attachments and everything that you did last time is saved for you in GMS.
Okay. Okay, well, I'm going to give it a try as soon as we get off.
Okay, good. If you run into problems, let us know.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Anybody else have questions before we sign off for the day? Okay, so I talked about July being our in-person meeting at the conference, and then August we'll have a monthly call as well. We're going to have a guest speaker in August. The guest speaker will be Linda Carpenter. She's our program director for our in-depth technical assistance program. Some of you know Linda very well, but through the National Center, we've been operating the in-depth technical assistance program for probably close to 10 years now. And so there's quite a few lessons. In-depth technical assistance is focused on statewide initiatives or very large jurisdictions that are aimed at substance abuse, child welfare, and the courts. And those states or jurisdictions that applied to receive technical assistance got just that, technical assistance. They did not receive a grant. And so Linda will be talking about the lessons over the last 7 to 10 years in in-depth technical assistance and some of the things that may be helpful for you, but more specifically, she'll be talking about the new phone calls that they've been organizing around their new IDTA or in-depth technical assistance awardees and how they're sharing lessons across states that's helping move their work forward. And what we'd like for you to take away from that is that we'd like to model that with this project. So she'll share her experience, and then beginning in September, we're going to allow each of you to begin sharing experiences, and we may allow each of you to kind of lead this call on a month-to-month basis. So we'll give each of you an opportunity to lead the call with your colleagues and begin sharing your lessons. And we'll start that in September. So with that, I thank all of you for your time. Any other things from any of the Change Leader staff or grantees?
So this is Sarah from Colorado.
Hey,
Just a quick question about NADCP and your meeting in July. Will it be possible to have call-in information for that meeting for those of us who won't be there in person?
Oh, that's a good question. Let me look into that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we have been able to do that in the past. I'm not 100% on that, but let me check.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Okay.
This is Alexis, and I just want to say thank you, everyone, for all your hard work on this, and it's exciting, and I hope you have a great weekend.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's it. Everyone, thanks so much for your time, and we're here if you need us. Have a great weekend.
Okay,
Thanks,
you
everybody.
too.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye.